Before we dive into today's intense story, a quick reminder. Over 90% of our viewers watch our videos but aren't subscribed. If you enjoy content like this, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. And if you find this story gripping, don't forget to like the video. It really helps us out.
I don't really know when it all started. Maybe it began long before I even realized it. Maybe the seeds were planted in those small moments when I felt unheard, unseen, just drifting through my own life like a ghost in my own house. I never meant for any of it to happen. I wish I could stand here and say that I planned it, or that it was a single mistake that I could point to and say, there, that's when it all went wrong. But it doesn't work like that. Things like this grow quietly in the dark, feeding off little cracks that no one notices at first. When I married David, I thought I had found exactly what I needed. He was calm, steady, practical. Everything my own chaotic family hadn't been. He made me feel safe. And for a long time, that was enough. I was the wife who packed his lunch, washed his shirts, reminded him of his mother's birthday. He worked long hours at his job in construction management. And I told myself, that was love too, that the hours he spent away from home were proof of how hard he worked for us, for me. And I tried to believe that the way we drifted past each other in the hallway at night wasn't something to worry about. But the truth is, I was lonely. I know people roll their eyes when someone says that. They think, well, you had a house, a husband, a good life. What more did you want? And maybe they're right. Maybe I was selfish. But loneliness eats at you in ways that are hard to explain. It's like sitting in a silent room for years, your own heartbeat the only sound you can hear, and you start to wonder if you're even real to anyone anymore. I met Mark at the community center where I volunteered twice a week. It wasn't glamorous work, sorting donations, helping organize events, filling out forms for people who needed food stamps or job training, but it got me out of the house. It gave me a reason to put on makeup and wear my nice jeans. Mark was in charge of IT support for the center's computers. He was easy to talk to, always had a joke ready. He noticed things. When I cut my hair, when I wore a new sweater, little things that David hadn't noticed in years. I swear I didn't think of him that way at first. I told myself I was just glad to have a friend. And I needed one. My own friends from college had drifted away over the years. Some had kids, some moved across the country. My mother passed away 2 years ago, and my father lives in a nursing home an hour away. So I let myself laugh at Mark's jokes. I let him carry the heavy boxes for me, thanked him when he brought me coffee. Nothing wrong with that, nothing at all. But things like that don't stay small. One afternoon, we stayed late to finish a mountain of paperwork before the food drive the next day. Everyone else had left hours ago. The air felt different. Quiet, heavy somehow. We sat side by side at the old wooden table in the back room, the overhead light buzzing. He asked me about David, how we met, what we did for fun. I laughed and said, "Fun? What's that?" He laughed too, but then he looked at me for a long time, not in a creepy way, just seeing me. Really seeing me. I don't need to describe every detail. Nothing happened that night except that we talked. Really talked. I told him things I hadn't said out loud in years. How I'd given up painting when I got married because there was never time. How I'd once dreamed of opening a little gallery. He told me about his divorce. How it blindsided him. How he felt like a failure afterward. It felt good to say those things in the soft dark of that old building. It felt good to have someone nod and understand. After that, I looked forward to Thursdays at the center in a way I hadn't looked forward to anything in years. I put on lipstick again. I curled my hair. I told myself it was silly. Nothing was happening. But inside, something had already changed. I was different. I was awake. The first time Mark asked me to meet him outside the center, I said no. I told him it wouldn't be right. I went home and stood in the shower for what felt like an hour. The water pounding on my back while my mind spun. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to David, listening to his breathing, wondering when we had stopped touching each other just to touch, when my body had become a stranger's even to me. A week later, Mark asked again. This time, I said yes. We met for coffee in a place across town where no one knew us. We sat in the corner and talked for 2 hours about nothing and everything. He made me laugh so hard I spilled my coffee on my scarf. He reached out to dab at the stain with a napkin, and his hand brushed my neck. I felt that touch for days afterward, like a bruise, like a secret. After that, it was like a door had opened that I didn't know how to close. I'd find excuses to stay late at the center, to linger over paperwork. Mark would stand too close behind me, his breath warm on my ear as he asked if I needed help with the printer. We never did anything more than stand close, whisper, maybe let our hands touch for a second longer than they should have. But in my mind, the lines blurred. I thought about him when I made dinner. I thought about him when I folded David's shirts. I felt guilty all the time, but I couldn't stop. Then one day, Mark kissed me. It was stupid, really. We were in the parking lot behind the community center saying goodbye. It was raining a little and I was shivering. He pulled me in just to hug me, he said. But then his lips were on mine and I didn't pull away. I don't even know how long it lasted. I just remember my heart hammering so hard I thought it might stop. After that kiss, I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I drove home in a daze, parked in the driveway and sat there for 15 minutes trying to think of what to say if David asked why I was late. He didn't ask. He barely looked up from his laptop when I walked in. I wish I could tell you that was the moment I ended it, that I went to Mark the next day and told him we had to stop, that I chose my husband and my home and my vows, but I didn't. I kept seeing Mark. We didn't even do much. Just stolen moments, long talks in the back room, secret glances across the hallway. But every one of those moments chipped away at my marriage, like a hammer tapping at glass. Sometimes I'd look at David across the dinner table and wonder if he knew. He never said anything. He just kept going to work, coming home, watching his shows, falling asleep on the couch. Maybe he didn't want to know. Maybe he knew in his own way and just didn't care anymore. That was the thought that made me cry the hardest, that maybe he wouldn't even fight for me if he found out. I started to hate myself for what I was doing. I'd stand in the bathroom at night staring at my reflection, wondering who I'd become. I'd wanted so badly to feel seen, to feel alive again. But at what cost? I'd made promises once, standing in a church in a white dress, believing in forever. Now I was sneaking around like a teenager, telling lies so easily I barely heard them leave my mouth. I don't know why I'm telling you all this now. Maybe because if I say it all out loud, it won't feel so heavy in my chest anymore. Maybe because I need to remember how I got here before I can figure out what to do next. I don't know how this story ends yet. I don't know if David will forgive me if he ever finds out, or if I'll ever forgive myself. But I know I can't keep living like this, half here, half somewhere else, breaking everything I once cared about one quiet secret at a time. And that's where I'll stop for now. Maybe tomorrow I'll have the courage to face what comes next. Maybe tomorrow I'll tell you the rest. After I told you all that, I sat in bed that night staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of my own words pressing on my chest. It's strange, isn't it? How you can keep secrets buried for so long that they feel like part of your bones. But the second you say them out loud, they feel like poison. I lay there listening to David snoring softly beside me, and I wondered if he dreamed about me the way I used to dream about him when we first met. I wondered if he missed me in some small way, even if he didn't say it. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table in my robe, and tried to plan how I would end things with Mark. I told myself it wasn't fair to him either. He was a grown man, he knew what he was doing, but I also knew I was giving him hope that I couldn't really give back. I didn't know if I would ever leave David. Part of me thought about it sometimes, what it would be like to pack a suitcase, to just walk out the door and start over. But then I'd think about the house we'd built, the life we'd layered year after year, even the quiet dinners that felt so empty but were still ours. I wasn't brave enough to burn it all down. I don't know if that makes me loyal or just a coward. I went to the community center that day determined to tell Mark it was over. I practiced the words in my head. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. It's not fair to my husband. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to me. But when I walked in and saw him leaning against the counter with that easy grin, my resolve melted like ice in the sun. He made some dumb joke about my terrible parking, and I laughed. And then I hated myself for laughing, for wanting to stand there just a little longer, soaking up the way he looked at me. We worked side by side most of the morning. He kept brushing my arm, little touches that made my skin tingle and my heart race in a way I hadn't felt in years. Around lunchtime, he suggested we sneak out for a sandwich at the cafe down the street. I knew I shouldn't go, but I went anyway. We sat outside under an umbrella, the air warm, the street busy with people who didn't know our secret. It felt dangerous and sweet at the same time, like we were teenagers skipping class. When we finished eating, he reached across the table and took my hand. Just like that. Bold, simple. And I let him. I felt this flood of warmth that made me want to cry and laugh at the same time. He asked me if I'd ever thought about what it would be like if it were just the two of us. No lies, no secrets. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The thought scared me more than I wanted to admit. Back at the center, I avoided him for the rest of the day. I felt like a child caught sneaking candy before dinner, ashamed but wanting more. I went home and cooked dinner like nothing happened. David came home late, distracted by some work problem. We ate in silence, the TV droning in the background. I looked at his tired face, his hands rough from years of building things for other people, and I felt this ache that almost knocked the air out of me. I still loved him. I did. But my love felt like an old coat, familiar, worn, comfortable, but not enough to keep out the cold anymore. Days passed like that, me trying to pull away from Mark, him pulling me back with his smile, his words, his understanding. He never pressured me to do more than I wanted, but he made it so easy to keep choosing him in small ways. We started texting late at night when David was asleep. We talked about books, music, silly things that made me feel young again. Sometimes he'd send me a song to listen to before bed, and I'd lie there with my earphones in, my heart hammering because he made me feel like someone worth thinking about. One evening, I went to visit my father at the nursing home. He didn't recognize me at first. He called me by my mother's name, then laughed it off when I corrected him. I sat with him for an hour, feeding him pudding, listening to him talk about people who'd been dead for years. On the drive home, I cried so hard I had to pull over. I thought about time, about how it slips through your fingers while you're busy trying to hold it all together. I thought about how I'd wasted so many years waiting for someone to see me, when maybe the real problem was that I'd stopped seeing myself. When I got home, David was in his chair, dozing off with the TV flickering. I watched him for a long time, remembering the boy he'd been when I met him. So sure of himself, so gentle with me in ways no one else ever had been. I wanted to wake him up, to shake him and tell him everything, to scream and cry and demand that he look at me, really look at me. But I didn't. I brushed his hair back from his forehead, kissed his cheek, and went upstairs. The next morning, I didn't go to the community center. I called in sick and stayed home instead. I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the neighbor's dog chase squirrels. My phone buzzed with Mark's messages. "Are you okay? Did I do something?" I didn't answer him right away. For the first time, I thought about what it would feel like to really tell him goodbye. But I didn't. Not that day. Not yet. Instead, I made a list. It sounds silly now, but I needed to see it all laid out in black and white. On one side, I wrote down what I would lose if David found out. Our house, our shared friends, the routine that felt safe even when it felt empty. On the other side, I wrote down what I would gain if I left. Freedom, maybe love, maybe regret. The list didn't help. It only made my head spin. That weekend, David suggested we go out for dinner, just the two of us. It shocked me. I couldn't remember the last time we'd done that without it being an anniversary or someone's birthday. He made a reservation at this little Italian place we used to love. I dressed up more than I needed to. I even put on perfume I hadn't worn in years. We sat across from each other with candles flickering between us. At first, the conversation was stiff, weather, work, the usual. Then, somewhere between the second glass of wine and dessert, he reached across the table and held my hand. Just like Mark had done, but different somehow, familiar and strange at the same time. He said, "I feel like I've been losing you. Are you happy?" The question hit me so hard I almost dropped my fork. I wanted to lie. I wanted to say, "Of course I'm happy." But instead, I just shook my head. He looked so sad, so tired. He didn't ask if there was someone else. He didn't accuse me. He just asked if I'd come back to him, as if I'd ever really left. That night, lying beside him, I knew I couldn't keep lying forever. Something had to break. Either my marriage would break, or this secret would. I just didn't know which one yet, and I was so scared of being the one to shatter it all. So that's where I am now, standing on a cliff edge I built myself. Maybe tomorrow I'll find the courage to jump one way or another. Maybe tomorrow I'll finally tell Mark goodbye or confess everything to David. Maybe tomorrow I'll remember who I was before I started hiding pieces of myself in other people's shadows. I don't know, but I promise I'll tell you how it ends when I know myself. I didn't sleep the night after that dinner with David. I lay awake, staring into the darkness, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the rise and fall of David's breathing beside me. Every so often he would shift and mumble something in his sleep, and I'd feel this crushing ache in my chest. I wanted to touch him, to roll over and wrap my arms around him, but I didn't. I felt like a ghost in my own bed, waiting for morning to come and force me to be real again. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living in that half-world where I told myself I wasn't doing anything so bad when I knew in my bones that I was tearing my own life apart, piece by piece. So I got up, showered, dressed, and left before David even woke up. I didn't want to see the questions in his eyes that I wasn't ready to answer yet. I drove to the community center early before the doors even opened. I sat in my car watching the sun rise over the old brick building, thinking about how many times I'd walked in there looking for something I couldn't name. When Mark pulled up and parked beside me, I almost wanted to start the car and drive away, just keep driving until all of it was behind me. But I didn't. I waited until he got out and tapped on my window. He smiled when I stepped out. "Hey, you're early," he said. He leaned in to kiss my cheek like he'd started doing sometimes when no one was around. I pulled back before he could. He looked confused, then worried. "We need to talk," I said. My voice didn't even sound like mine. It was too calm, too steady. He nodded and we went inside, the old floorboards creaking under our feet. We sat in the same little back room where it all started, where he'd first made me feel seen, where I'd let myself drift further and further from who I'd promised to be. "I can't do this anymore, Mark," I said. He didn't argue right away. He just looked at me with those kind eyes that once made me feel so safe. "Is it because of him?" he asked. "It's because of me," I said. "I've been lying to myself. I've been lying to you and to David, and I can't do it anymore. I thought I was lonely, and maybe I was, but this wasn't the way to fix it. This only made it worse." He reached for my hand, and I let him hold it one last time because I needed to feel it, needed to remember it and say goodbye to it all at once. "You know I love you, right?" he said. I nodded, and I hated that it hurt so much to hear it. "I know, and I care about you too, but I can't have both. I have to try to fix what I broke, or at least face it. I don't know what will happen, but I know I can't hide here with you anymore." He squeezed my hand and then let go. For a second, I thought he might get angry or try to convince me to stay, but he didn't. He just sat there, staring at the floor, and then he looked up and said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." I thanked him for everything, though I didn't even know what I was thanking him for in the end. Maybe for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Maybe for giving me something that forced me to wake up. I walked out before I could change my mind. When I got home that afternoon, David was waiting for me in the living room. He looked so tired, like he'd been sitting there for hours replaying every moment of our life together. For a second, I wanted to run again, to crawl into bed and pretend none of it was real. But instead, I sat down across from him and I told him everything. Not every detail, some things were just for me to carry, but enough for him to know I'd failed him, failed us. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything or slam the door. He just listened. When I finished, he covered his face with his hands and sat like that for a long time while my heart cracked open in my chest. Finally, he looked at me with eyes so full of hurt that I had to look away. "Do you love him?" he asked. "I thought I did," I said. "Maybe I did in some small way, but I love you. Even when I felt like you didn't see me anymore, I still loved you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it, but I had to tell you." We sat in silence for what felt like forever. I don't know what I expected, an ending, a beginning, maybe both. Finally, he said, "I don't know what to do with this." His voice broke, and I felt my throat tighten. "I don't either," I said, "but I'm here. If you want to try, I'll try too. If you don't, I'll leave. It's your choice now." That night, we didn't talk anymore. We just sat there until the sun went down, two people who'd built a life together, and then broken it without ever meaning to. We didn't touch. We didn't say we loved each other. We just breathed the same air and let it all hang between us. It's been months since then. Some days are good, better than I deserve. Some days I catch him looking at me like he's searching for the woman he married, and I wonder if he sees her anymore. I started painting again, just small. Canvases in the guest room that I turned into a studio. David doesn't ask what I'm painting, but sometimes he stands in the doorway and watches. Mark and I don't talk. He moved on, I think. I hope he did. I hope he finds someone who isn't afraid to choose him completely. I hope he's happy. I don't know what happens next for David and me. Maybe we'll make it. Maybe we won't. But at least now we're here, in the same room, looking at each other with the lights on and no shadows left to hide in. Maybe that's all we can do, stand in the ruin of what we broke and see if we can build something better out of the pieces. I don't know if I deserve a happy ending, but I do know I want one. And for the first time in a long time, I'm willing to work for it, to stay, to speak, to try. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it has to be.